Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosovich, George Stoia here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page. Just got done with day 4 of the Brent Venables football camp. Final day coming up on Thursday, and then you enter a period where it's like it's finally summer, sort of, before we head down to Dallas for Big 12.
Couple weeks away, or I guess
SEC media days. I
you
was
almost said
caught
Big
myself.
12,
I'm going to do that a lot here over the next month, I feel like. But we do have a Board of Regents meeting coming up on Friday. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page once again. Some interesting news today before the Board of Regents meeting coming up. If you want to read about it, George wrote the story already. That's one of the best places to find the breaking news for Oklahoma athletics. And all you got to do to join SoonerScoop.com, great promo code for you guys out there, OU1, promo code OU1, $1 for 2 months, special offer for the YouTube viewer like yourself. And it was notable today. There was actually a notable substantive.
yeah, that's good.
Is that going to be good?
Yeah, no, that's good.
All right, that we'll work our way through it. I got a new tooth.
You did.
I don't look like a scumbag anymore. Big news though. Seriously, out of the Oklahoma football offices, Curtis Lofton has been officially tabbed with the general manager position. And I think that we want to get on here and we kind of want to talk about it because I think there are some very basic Q&As as far as or frequently asked questions as far as what a general manager is. So let's start there before we get into the, I guess, smaller picture of what Curtis Lofton actually is being tabbed to do.
Basically, it's roster management, and Curtis has been helping with that, I think, over the past few months, really. But now it's kind of an official title of, hey, he's going to oversee things like, talent evaluation and things like that. He's not going to necessarily be breaking down recruiting film. He might, look at some of that stuff and portal players. Obviously, we know he's been involved there as well, but it's also looking at NIL and evaluations there and kind of how to judge where does a player fit on our roster? What are they worth? What is a position worth? Those sorts of things. And with the way college football is changing, in the sense that these guys are eventually going to be employees, they're going to have salaries. I think having somebody in this type of a role, as well as assistant GM Chuck Lilly, who they hired to help Curtis Lofton, I think it's really important for Oklahoma to have somebody like that, and especially somebody like Curtis, who has seen the professional side of football. I mean, obviously played 8 years in the NFL, was very successful. I believe that he, was even, I think, an intern as a scout at one point. So he understands evaluations. He understands how agents work as well, obviously working with them when he was a player. So he's very connected and he knows too, I think, some of the agents now that are in college football, because that is the norm as well, is a lot of these top players have agents. So he kind of really fits that mold. But this is a situation, Eddie, that really, if we want to get into kind of how this happened, this goes back months ago. You'll remember I asked Brent Venables straight up back in March during spring practice, was he interested in hiring a general manager? Because you've seen it across college football. And would Curtis Lofton be somebody that they would be interested in? And at that time, several people had reported that Curtis Lofton was hired as the general manager. That wasn't true then. Obviously now, 3 months later, it is true now. Oklahoma was interested in Sean McGee, who was the former Bears director of player personnel, and now he is Michigan's general manager and has been the last year now. So OU was interested in people outside of Oklahoma. I think it eventually got to a point where Curtis had been involved in several of these processes. He understood what the title was, and it just was a perfect fit. And so, within the last week, they finally made it official, and obviously he got a huge promotion and pay bump. He was originally the director of the Soul Mission. Now his title has changed to general manager.
Very nice little pay bump, going from $101,500 to $300,000 next season. Obviously, all of that will be approved,
which tells you how important his role is
by the Board of Regents coming up on Friday. But and this is a position that I would say that I think over the last couple of years, this has become kind of the norm in college football, especially at a program like Oklahoma. You look down at the list, and it's Michigan, Alabama, Florida, Texas Tech, Ohio State, SMU, who hired J.R. Sandlin to be the general manager down there for the Mustangs as they make their move into the ACC. Nebraska has one. That's just a list of some of the schools that are going this way with a general manager. Now you step in with Curtis Lofton, who I think it is important to point out, very familiar with this process. Like, I think that all of those years in the NFL that you can come back and you have a little bit of knowledge of where this thing is headed.
Yeah, definitely. And I think with Curtis, he knows the program. He obviously knows Brent Venables, who he played for at Oklahoma. He knows the type of players that he's looking for, not only in terms of on the field. Like I said, I don't know how much he'll be sitting down and watching film of a lot of these guys, but he'll be meeting with them. He'll be meeting with their families. As the director of the Soul Mission, he's already been doing a lot of that over the past few years, trying to sell Oklahoma to these kids and talking about, the off the field things, finances, those sorts of things. They have programs in place already, within the program where they teach these guys about how to, control your money in the NIL era and just in regular life. So I think that he's a really good fit for that. And again, when you look at the way that the rosters are changing, I mean, there's been talk about limiting, how many scholarships you have or walk-ons and then, who gets to be on the roster, who doesn't, who's on scholarship, the preferred walk-on plus NIL scholarship programs. I think Curtis understands all that and is somebody that can work well hand in hand with Brent. And like you said, you're seeing a lot of top programs have these, and maybe they're not necessarily labeled as quote unquote general manager. Maybe it's a chief of staff or a director of player personnel. You're seeing this across the board in college football where if you're going to be successful, you have to have somebody that is constantly looking at your roster management, because you just don't know how many guys you're going to lose in the portal, how many guys you want to bring in the portal, how many guys can you bring in your recruiting class out of high school, those sorts of things. And then when it comes to the money, how are you dividing, that money out? And so I think that's why you have to have somebody in place, and not just one person. I mean, it's a full hands on deck. You've got to have an assistant GM like a Chuck Lilly, a Woody Glass, who is also on the Board of Regents. He's getting a $40,000 raise. He's the chief of staff, basically Brent's right hand man, and he's handling a lot of the day to day operations and things like that. That aren't necessarily on the field related.
How do you see, how do you see like the, not necessarily a division of powers, but with Curtis and Chuck Lilly, that would be interesting to see like what the responsibilities are for each one of them.
Yeah. Talking to some people today, obviously they still report to Brent. Brent at the end of the day has the final say on a lot of this stuff, but I think they're mostly working hand in hand. And obviously Curtis with the full general manager title versus Chuck Lilly, the assistant general manager. I would assume Curtis has final say on a lot of this stuff, but I've heard great things about Chuck Lilly so far. Yeah. I know that he's been super involved at these camps. We've seen him out every single day with a clipboard and taking notes on certain guys. I don't know if that's evaluations or what it is. I know that he is attached to Brent Venables' hip at these football camps for high school. So I know that he's going to be super involved. We've seen Curtis obviously involved in everything they do. So I don't exactly know. I'd love to talk to him.
Yeah.
I'm not sure we will, but I do
still
think
working on the defense coordinator.
Exactly.
There might be a line of demarcation or like a line of order that you have to get through.
But these are guys that I think are vital to the program, and that speaks to, again, how much they're getting paid. $300,000. You're essentially an assistant football coach at that point. So, again, I think it speaks to the change of the college football landscape, and also how Brent Venables and the University of Oklahoma has kind of adjusted to that.
It'll be interesting to see too, just in terms of like not just Oklahoma, but just college football as a whole, a grand scale, in terms of how close do some of these quote unquote, I guess, like general manager offices on a college campus, how much does that reflect of what a front office would be looking like at the next level? It'll be interesting to see how that integration takes place.
And that's kind of back to like what Brent said to me back in March. He goes, what exactly is a general manager? Is it an NFL GM? I don't think it's necessarily to that extent.
Yeah, he asked you what you thought a general manager was, if I remember correctly, right?
I asked you the question, Brent. But, I do think, though, that like it's roster management. Like that's the kind of bare bones of it.
I think that if there's anything that anybody's learned about this like new era of college football, if you're not paying attention to the roster that you're having to basically recruit year in and year out, outside of probably a handful of guys, you have to have some type of kind of stranglehold about who's coming and who's in, who's out.
Right. And I think you have to look at it from top to bottom. It's from Jackson Arnold to, this is going to sound bad, but to Chapman McCown.
Sure.
Like it's every player on the roster. Where do they fit? How do they help your team? Even if there's somebody that's not getting on the field a whole lot. And then it's throughout the year saying, hey, who might enter the portal? I think talking to guys about player retention, keeping guys, maybe also processing guys, and then going when the portal window's open, knowing, hey, we need a guy at this position and we need this type of a guy at that position. Identifying those type of players, I think is huge.
To a certain extent, keeping an eye on what's happening outside of your own program.
Yeah.
And thinking about, okay, is this guy going to enter the portal? Would we want to take a chance on him? Do we want to reserve a scholarship for somebody that could fit that role?
Right. And those things are happening year round. While the portal's open a certain amount of days and everybody knows those days, there's obviously evaluations going on of players that they think might enter the portal at some point. So, I'm not saying anybody's tampering.
Yeah.
Even though we encourage that on this show.
Absolutely.
I do think that it's important to, you have to be on your toes at all times because you just never know when a guy like maybe a Caden Green leaves and all of a sudden maybe you're not prepared to fill a void like that. So I think that, again, having somebody like Curtis who has the background that he does really helps Oklahoma, and I think is again, it shows we've seen it now with Brent several times in different ways. I mean, hiring Zach Alley to be the co-defensive coordinator and kind of take the reins there, and now having somebody like Curtis that he can kind of lean on when maybe Brent's involved in other things, that he can say, hey, we need to go out and get whoever in the portal. Curtis is already maybe on top of it.
And if nothing else, I think it's just a comfortable position for Curtis and somebody that, grew up in Kingfisher, went to Oklahoma, played for Brent. It's an easy sell. It's something that he is very familiar with, and something that I think that, like, if you're going in, you're interviewing candidates, certainly the resume lines up, but it's like that extracurricular, the bonus stuff that you get on top of that. Somebody that obviously loves the program.
Yeah, again, I said it earlier, he knows Brent as well as anybody, has now worked with him for the last couple of years, which by the way, we should say, it's our understanding that, he'll still be somewhat involved a little bit with the Soul mission, but I do think that it'll kind of be a group effort. There'll be other people that come in and maybe help out a little bit. I don't
have Josh Norman that's kind of in charge of that stuff as well.
I know
Caleb
there's
Kelly's
some other
around.
former players that have been wanting to get involved that kind of just want to do it for free.
Sure.
So I wouldn't worry too much about them filling that position. I don't think that that's something that's on the horizon right now.
Was there anything else on the minutes, I guess, that were released for the Board of Regents meeting coming up on Friday in Ardmore that really kind of caught your attention? I know that there had been a couple of items about maybe some press box stuff or some advancements to the stadium.
That was the word was that was going to be on this Board of Regents agenda. It is not. Okay. So maybe it's going to be the next one. I know there's been talks about kind of getting to that next phase of the stadium renovations that they've been talking about for so long. It wasn't on this agenda. Maybe it'll be on the next one. The only other thing on there, Emmett Jones's daughter is joining the recruiting staff.
Interesting.
I believe maybe in a part-time type role.
Well, if she's anything, as good as her dad has been, and we talked about that with Josh yesterday with the new recent commitment on Monday. He's on fire.
Oh, I know. And maybe she's the secret sauce behind it all, but she'll be joining the recruiting staff in some capacity, helping out with that. And then also it should be noted that Brent Venables' contract is up for review. That's typical. That happens usually in the summer every year with the head coach. And I would assume he'll get some sort of bump that he, typically gets with his contract and it kind of kicking in for this next year. And I wouldn't be surprised too if they extended him maybe a year or two. That's usually how those things kind of work. So don't be surprised on Friday if you see that his salary went up a little bit.
Very good. Hit up Two Frogs while you're down in Ardmore. Isn't that the restaurant right off the highway? So, all right, very good. We wanted to kind of jump on here. I know there's probably a lot of question marks about, you look at general manager next to a guy in a college football program. It's kind of like, what is that? So a little bit of a frequently asked questions that we tried to get to. So, George, we appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. They really buried that at the bottom of the agenda. I think it was on page 326 of like 330 pages.
Really?
So, yeah, it was like the very last item. And so it took some digging to find.
I'm glad you did that because I would have looked at the first, let's be honest, 3 pages of 328.
Look at the
and I would
table
have
of
said,
contents, and it doesn't even say anything about it. So I was just like, oh.
Trying to get sneaky on us, are they? All right. For George Stoia, I'm Eddie Radosevich. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube page.